silencieux aujourd'hui. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très content d'être ici, évidemment, avec ma collègue et notre secrétaire parlementaire, Jennifer O'Connell. Today in Parliament, our government tabled the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians' special report on foreign interference in Canada's democratic processes and institutions. The government welcomes NSICOP's report and thanks its members for putting the report together. I'll remind you that it was the government that asked NSICOP and the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency to do this work. So this report is an important part of our continued effort to evolve and strengthen measures to protect Canadians. There are, however, elements of the report with which the government respectfully disagrees. The government's concerns center around the interpretation of intelligence reports, which lack the necessary caveats inherent to intelligence, as well as the lack of acknowledgement of the full breadth of outreach that has been done with respect to informing parliamentarians about the threat posed by foreign interference. The committee rightly stresses that all parliamentarians must be part of the solution, and the government obviously wholly endorses that view as well. We will consider the committee's recommendations as part of our work to continuously refine and adapt our measures to counter foreign interference. Récemment, le gouvernement a présenté le projet de loi C-70, loi concernant la lutte contre l'ingérence étrangère, et le projet de loi C-65 aussi, loi modifiant la loi électorale du Canada, qui contribueront tous les deux à nos efforts de lutte contre l'ingérence étrangère et à la protection des processus et institutions démocratiques au Canada. Ce rapport, ainsi que les récents rapports de l'Office de surveillance des activités en matière de sécurité nationale et de renseignement, et l'enquête publique sur l'ingérence étrangère présidée par Madame la juge Hogg contribueront à informer et à soutenir nos efforts. Une fois de plus, je voudrais remercier les membres du comité, les députés et les sénateurs pour leur travail qu'ils ont accompli dans l'exercice de leur important mandat. Et maintenant, Jennifer et moi, nous avons bien hâte de répondre à vos questions. Jennifer and I are obviously very happy to take your questions.
Do you agree with what was said in the report that an MP sought a meeting with a foreign intelligence officer?
I want to be careful not to comment on specific matters, intelligence matters. I think this, again, is an example where certain information doesn't have the caveats that some of the intelligence documents that we would see have. I think that one of the things that struck me was the way that the director of CSIS, David Vigneault, described intelligence as forming part of a puzzle. Each bit of information is a piece of the puzzle, but to get an accurate picture of all the circumstances, you need more than a few pieces of the puzzle. But that's one of the concerns we have in terms of leaving the impression that an individual piece of intelligence might constitute evidence or might be a fact. But I want to be careful not to speak about a specific circumstance that...
Elected officials wittingly cooperated with India or foreign states such as India. So do you agree with that? I mean, these are pretty serious accusations that are leveled here. So can you be a bit more forthcoming about what it is you disagree with in this report?
I think as a matter of principle, it's unwise to speak about specific elements that may involve individuals. I have a lot of confidence in our national security and intelligence agencies to do the work they're doing. I am regularly updated on the important work they're doing. Like our colleagues on the National Security Intelligence Committee, we see different pieces of evidence and different analyses that they prepare. I don't think it serves a specific purpose to comment on a specific individual or allegation around a specific circumstance like that.
The report found that in 2018, the government was aware there were problems, that what you put in place, the report says, wasn't enough, that the government was slow to act, and what's in place now isn't enough. So what do you say to that?
I would disagree with both those assertions. I think it's important to remind people that when we formed the government in 2015, there were absolutely no measures in place to detect, disrupt, and counter foreign interference in the electoral context. Mr. Poilievre was Minister of Democratic Institutions. 2 years in 2013, CSIS publicly identified the risk of interference in democratic processes. The previous Conservative government did absolutely nothing. Our government came into office, put a series of measures in place in 2018. We've had a number of independent experts review those measures. We've had panels of the most senior public servants confirm that those measures had been effective. We've had an interim report of a public commission of inquiry chaired by a Quebec Court of Appeal justice that has found that the measures in place were such that she could not conclude that any element of foreign interference affected the outcome of the election. But we've also said that we are absolutely committed to evolving and strengthening the measures that are in place. We're the ones that asked the National Security Intelligence Committee to do this work. We will obviously study their particular recommendations in the context of Justice Hugg's report that will be coming out later this year, the review agency's report, and we will work with parliamentarians to strengthen these measures. I'm extremely encouraged. A number of the things in the NSICOP report are already being enacted in Bill C-70, the legislation before the House to counter foreign interference. And again, we're very optimistic by the nonpartisan way that this legislation appears to be handled in Parliament. So there's an example, perhaps, where we can work constructively together.
Can I add?
Oh, sure. Jennifer, I'd be happy
Sorry, can I just add something to that? It's important to note, if in reference to 2018, there was also an NSICOP report on foreign interference in 2019, which also highlighted elements which the government has acted on. So foreign interference didn't begin in 2018. It didn't begin in 2015. It is evolving. It will continue. Not one piece of legislation will end it. It is something the government is always going to have to be working on to address. It's why we appreciate NSICOP looking at this previously as well as now to continue to form that advice based on the evolving situation. So it's important to note that this isn't NSICOP's first look at foreign interference, but it's part of that building block.
What's not addressed in that bill, one of the examples is the common threshold for action. So this report gives 2 examples of the Prime Minister not being briefed in one case on intelligence on foreign interference, where they felt he should have been, and also a PCR consulate. This report said was only expelled because of leaks and public and pressure at that point. So what will you do about that common threshold for action that's not addressed in the bill?
Again, we're always looking at ways that we can strengthen the measures in terms of removing foreign diplomats. That's an appropriate question for the Foreign Affairs Minister. I know that those are always circumstances that she evaluates based on the intelligence information that she gets as well. But there again, there was one specific reference to some information that the Prime Minister would have received in 2020, and it turns out in this NSICOP report, it turns out the note was actually never signed and didn't make its way to the Prime Minister. That's why I think it's important to have a context in terms of our government's sustained efforts to counter foreign interference, our commitment to asking experts, including the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, for their advice on how we can strengthen and evolve these measures. And of course, we're very much looking forward to Justice Ugg's report at the end of this year, and would hope that the same collaborative spirit that we've seen around the legislation currently before Parliament might also extend into further measures necessary if our colleagues in Parliament wanted to work on that. Vous avez une question en français?
Oui, sur les mesures, le comité demande aux parlementaires d'examiner les conséquences éthiques et légales possibles de leur rencontre avec des représentants étrangers. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous comptez faire par rapport à ce point-là spécifiquement? Est-ce qu'il pourrait y avoir des consignes ou des règles soumises aux élus par rapport à leur rencontre avec des diplomates, par exemple?
Bien, encore une fois, si les parlementaires décident de rencontrer des diplomates au Canada, c'est parfaitement dans leur fonction de déterminer si c'est des rencontres qu'ils ou elles veulent prendre. Cependant, je pense que c'est important d'identifier, et c'est ça une chose qui est importante pour nous. Nous avons augmenté massivement les sessions de briefage disponibles aux parlementaires, députés et sénateurs, des services de renseignement, des services de sécurité, que ce soit à travers la Chambre des communes ou directement du service de renseignement de sécurité pour préparer précisément nos collègues parlementaires pour ces rencontres. Alors, dans n'importe quel moment qu'un parlementaire décide de rencontrer un diplomate ou quelqu'un affecté au Canada, évidemment, le gouvernement demeure, et ça n'a pas besoin d'une permission politique, ils peuvent demander avec raison à nos services de sécurité de fournir ces renseignements-là. Mais je veux être prudent, ce n'est pas au gouvernement de légiférer la conduite des parlementaires quand ce qui a trait aux réunions qu'ils vont prendre ou qu'elles vont prendre. Cependant, le comité de la procédure de la Chambre a souvent des séances avec le commissaire à l'éthique. Ça relève encore une fois des parlementaires eux-mêmes, mais le gouvernement ne va pas légiférer ou essayer de gérer les rencontres que les parlementaires ont de leur propre discrétion. Cependant, on va s'assurer que tous les renseignements appropriés sont disponibles.
Sur une autre recommandation, on vous demande, le comité vous demande au gouvernement de considérer les mises en candidature des différents partis politiques et de voir est-ce que ça devrait être soumis au même cadre dans la loi électorale du Canada. La juge Hogg avait aussi dans son rapport préliminaire des recommandations préliminaires à cet effet et à ce moment-là, vous n'aviez pas pris d'engagement du côté du Parti libéral du Canada. Alors aujourd'hui, ça fait quand même un deuxième rapport qui vous demande ça. Qu'est-ce que vous dites?
Bien, moi, je pense que je ne veux pas être en désaccord avec votre question, c'est sûr, mais je crois que je me suis engagé à s'assurer que le Parti libéral regarde toutes les recommandations afin de s'assurer que les règles en place sont appropriées. J'ai aussi dit, et je me rappelle de cette discussion-là, j'ai pleine confiance dans les règles qui existent au sein du Parti libéral quant aux investitures. Cependant, moi aussi, j'ai noté les commentaires de la juge Hogg quant à la possibilité qu'elle va nous fournir des avis ou des recommandations afin de renforcer les règles qui sont en place. Vous comprendrez que c'est les règles internes de différentes formations politiques que le gouvernement décide de légiférer ou de proposer des mesures législatives quant aux affaires internes des formations politiques. Je pense que c'est évidemment sensible. Cependant, j'ai eu ces conversations-là avec mes collègues députés de l'opposition. On a tous une responsabilité comme parlementaires de travailler avec nos formations politiques pour s'assurer que les règles en place sont bel et bien les bonnes règles. Et moi, j'ai hâte à voir les avis de la commission Hogg. Mais comme j'ai dit, moi, à l'intérieur du Parti libéral, je suis très conscient des règles d'investiture. Je pense que les règles sont appropriées et ont été suivies, mais cependant, on est toujours ouvert à les renforcer aux mesures.
The officials that the report states assisted foreign states, are they still sitting as MPs?
And what will you do in response now if this report?
That was two questions. So again, I'm not going to address the individual.
Some specifics when this report makes pretty serious allegations.
But Canadians, again, will have the benefit of seeing Justice Hogg's report at the end of this year. We think that a public inquiry that the government called with the support of all the opposition parties is a very important part of this exercise of helping Canadians understand the nature and the threat of foreign interference and what measures are appropriate to counter that foreign interference. So that's the work that we're always committed to continuing to do. Jennifer, do you want to add something?
I would just say that the work that NSICOP does is crucially important. It helps us build on the measures that we've implemented, and this C70 is a good example of something that a number of the recommendations outlined in this report is something that we currently, right downstairs, are beginning study on. I think it's a nonpartisan issue in dealing with strengthening our democratic institutions, and Canadians can and should expect that all parliamentarians are going to put in place the structures that will protect our institutions, and that this will be an ongoing evolution of policy that needs to be adjusted to make sure that our elections cannot be interfered with.
Thank you. Sorry, I know we're keeping Canadians in suspense. They're extremely excited to hear from Canada's extraordinary transport minister So with that, I wouldn't want to hog the podium when somebody so much better is just on the verge of coming to the podium. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.